I'd like to call the meeting to order. Pursuant to order of reference received on May 10th, 2016 and the Standing Order 1082, the committee will now begin its study of the Supplementary Estimates A for 2016-17 and the 2016 Immigration Levels Plan. Appearing before us today is the Minister, Minister McCallum, along with senior department officials. Minister, I would like to call vote 1A under Citizenship and Immigration Canada and invite you to make your opening statement. Minister, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. I think you'd agree it's a fairly regular appearance we're making with you, which is, of course, a great pleasure. And I am joined by a number of officials, Richard Wex, the Associate Deputy Minister, Katrina Tapley, Tony Matson, Don Edlund, and David Manicombe, and together we will try to answer your questions. Je suis très heureux d'être ici aujourd'hui.
I'm very pleased to be here today to present Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship Canada's requests for additional expenditures under the Supplementary Estimates A for fiscal year 2016-2017.
Expenditures set out in these supplementary estimates come to $188.2 million. In my remarks, I will focus on some of the most significant funding items or transfers that we need to help the department meet its goals. As you will see, the items are linked largely to the Refugee Initiative and to my department's 2016 Annual Levels Plan that was tabled in Parliament this spring, and these, of course, are the two items on your agenda today. Preliminary results for 2015-16 show that IRCC spent $188.8 million. This is approximately $110.7 million less than planned. These cost savings or deferred spending are the result of good financial management and cost-effective decisions, and several factors lay behind the government coming in under budget. First, lower than anticipated costs for transportation and overseas processing, unused contingency funds, and finally the decision not to use interim refugee lodging sites. Those were largely the military bases which we may have been called upon to use but did not need. Under Supplementary Estimates A, we are requesting a funding increase of $39.4 million under operating expenditures in the effort to resettle additional government-sponsored Syrian refugees. This will enable us to meet our commitment to resettle 25,000 government-sponsored Syrian refugees by the end of 2016. Avec ces nouveaux fonds, nous entendons payer.
With this new funding, we will provide for 51 full-time staff to be used in processing of permanent resident applications overseas. The funding will help pay for our partners' support in facilitating processing, as well as for commercial flights to transport refugees to this country from overseas, as well as pre-departure services. The money will also pay for IRCC staff to help manage settlement programs, helping resettle Syrian refugees at their final destinations.
Resettlement funding increases of $99.6 million under grants and contributions will also go toward activities including the following: refugee income support to help them start their new lives here, and funding for third parties to support overseas pre-departure services. This also includes funding to help integrate Syrian refugees into Canadian communities by providing settlement services such as employment and language training. These estimates also contain another item related to refugees. In order to intervene in refugee applications or appeals where there are concerns about fraud, credibility, or system integrity, these estimates seek to continue with the Ministerial Reviews and Intervention Pilot Project. This request for an increase of $5 million under operating expenditures would carry the project for one more year, pending a review of the pilot's results and taking a decision on whether to make this pilot permanent. Les fonds demandés visent le financement continu.
The request continues funding for some 63 full-time equivalents. This would include staff in 3 reviews and interventions offices who would review both refugee claims and decisions on the basis of integrity and credibility. Funding would also provide for staff at the department's national headquarters to provide performance measurement, quality assurance, and functional guidance.
So let me now turn to the 2016 Levels Plan, which I understand will be the focus of the second hour of this meeting. As I said in a previous appearance before you, the government is committed to a strong, generous, and welcoming country through the immigration system. We strive to open Canada's doors to those who want to contribute to our prosperity and our diverse culture. The recent Levels plans called for Canada to welcome 300,000 new permanent resident immigrants in 2016. That's the point target. The range is 280 to 305,000, which is the highest number of projected immigrant admissions since World War I. More families will be reunited under this plan. Family class admissions are expected to increase to between 75 and 82,000. Refugee admissions will be between 41 and 46,000, almost quadruple the range for 2015. Par ailleurs, nous n'avons pas oublié à quel point l'avenir.
At the same time, we haven't lost sight of the fact that immigration is critical to Canada's economic future. That's why economic immigration programs will continue to account for the majority of all immigration admissions. As I say that, I must also note that the numbers in the economic class include family members of principal applicants, and that immigrants in all classes, including refugees and reunited family members, make meaningful contributions to our economy and to our communities.
In other words, all immigrants are, to one degree or another, economic immigrants. I'm pleased to say that we are on track to meeting our processing targets this year. Consistent with the priorities identified in my mandate letter from the Prime Minister, the Levels Plan calls for the reduction in backlogs and an improvement of processing times in multiple programs, especially family class. Under these supplementary estimates, an adjustment to operating expenditures requires a $20.9 million increase to reduce application processing times and achieve higher immigration admissions. This is in keeping with an objective set out in the 2016 Immigration Levels Plan. The funding would provide for 191 full-time equivalents. It would support many activities, such as reducing existing family class inventories, increasing family class intake, and streamlining our processing. Under grants and contributions is an increase of $18.1 million, also dedicated to this year's levels, which would go towards settlement services such as language training, employment bridging, and facilitating access to settlement services. Integration of immigrants is key, so my department will use the money for settlement services such as language learning for newcomers and support services that bridge new immigrants' arrival in their communities and in places of employment. Looking forward, this summer we will be engaging with Canadians on the topic of immigration. Our consultations will help feed the policies that determine how many immigrants come to Canada and what their backgrounds might be. Of course, what we hear will be reflected in the next Levels Plan, which, by the way, will not be for just one additional year, but it will be for 3 additional years. Comme je vous l'ai mentionné au départ,
as I indicated earlier, these are just some of the highlights of the adjustments under Supplementary Estimates A. Looking at the Immigration Levels Plan, Our government's vision to attract more newcomers to this country is clear. This is reflected in the supplementary estimates requests. We want to be clear that we are making family reunification a core priority.
We see immigration as a key to economic and social success. At the same time, we want to ensure Canada does not neglect its international standing as a beacon for refugees fleeing protection. With that, Mr. Chair, I will stop, and my officials and I will be very happy to answer your questions.
Thank you, Minister, for those introductory remarks. Mr. Chen, 7 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Minister and staff, for attending today's meeting. And I first want to applaud the incredible work that's being done in the department, particularly around Syrian refugee resettlement. I know that in our previous meetings where we've heard from witnesses on the topic of the selection of government-assisted refugees, that there has been questions around whether the government should go beyond the United Nations High Commission for Refugees in terms of selection for those government-assisted refugees, on the basis that there are many vulnerable populations around the world. Minister, can you share what factors would United Nations High Commission for Refugees look at? What factors would they consider in their work to select the most vulnerable?
Well, look, we have great faith in the United Nations to provide us the best possible information on who are indeed the most vulnerable refugees. So we have relied on the United Nations to select those people according to their criteria with which we agree, and in particular, refugees are considered on grounds of need without respect to religion or other such factors. I'd ask Don Edlin to describe in more detail or David Manicombe, the criteria in more precision used by the United Nations.
The United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees works closely with all resettlement countries from around the world, including the large resettlement countries like Canada, the United States, Australia, and others, for each population to develop indicators of vulnerability. The indicators of vulnerability are not only based on the reason they fled their country, but whether they are vulnerable in their country of first asylum, whether they have necessary supports, whether they have family members to help them, whether or not they are single women dealing with extreme vulnerability inside a refugee camp. The indicators of vulnerability vary from population to population, and sometimes they are very individual and cannot be defined as groups. But they include things like being a member of a religious minority, persecution due to sexual orientation, vulnerability to violence in the place where they are now. So when the United Nations interviews refugees, they take note of all of these factors and then look at whether or not, from amongst the tragic situation in the country of first asylum, this individual should be a priority for resettlement to another country.
Okay. Thank you. Under the supplementary estimates, we do see that there will be an additional 10,000 Syrian guards in 2016, and as part of that, there's an increase of $99.6 million for resettlement funding. This money will go towards supporting refugee communities to help them start their lives and to provide them services such as employment and language training programs. We've also heard from organizations that their funding, for example, for LINK programs have been decreased. Common sense would dictate that just because one particular organization has a lower funding for a particular year doesn't mean that overall funding hasn't increased. So to the Minister and staff, could you explain why certain organizations might receive less funding in a particular year while other organizations receive more funding to support programs like LINK?
Yes, I think we are doing the right thing in terms of the 3-year moving average formula. It was introduced by the previous government, I believe, but this is one of the items from the previous government with which we agree. And that is, the money should basically go to where the immigrants are going. And so the amount of money any province receives is proportional to the number of immigrants that that province receives, as calculated by a 3-year moving average. So that if one province gets more than it used to, it will get more money. If it gets less than it used to, it will get less money. But that is the division of a pie of a given size, if you wish. In addition, there have been substantial increases to the amount of money, notably for language training, but for other aspects of settlement. And indeed, I think Dawn Edlund has information on language training in British Columbia, which she can share with you.
Certainly, Minister. So, Mr. Chair, in British Columbia, it was one of the provinces using the 3-year rolling average where the amount of allocation dropped. And that meant that service provider organizations generally, for all settlement services, had a cut of between 1% and 8%. And then when we had the large amounts of money specifically for Syrian refugees, we targeted that money not under that settlement funding formula, but to where the Syrian refugees were actually settling and being permanently housed. So our staff across the country have been working closely with the service provider organizations to identify the needs of the refugee population in particular and identifying funding priorities. And as funding amounts of money have been approved, then that money has been pushed out the door to meet those needs. So for example, in British Columbia for language training, at the end of the fiscal year for 15-16 for the Syrian refugee arrival, and for the full year of 16-17, there's been an increase of funding for language training of $3.28 million. That's allowed to create 69 language classes and about 1,242 seats for the Syrian refugees who were there. And that's actually been targeted at the specific communities where we know the Syrians have resettled and also where there were wait lists.
15 seconds.
What types of services are available after 12 months for GARs?
I think the 15 seconds are gone, but after 12 months, the income support ends, but the other supports for language training and other areas continue.
Thank you, Minister. Ms. Rumpel, 7 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To Mr. Matson, earlier this week, the Minister told the House of Commons that the government had funded $600 million for settlement in 2016-2017, and, quote, that is $27 million extra for new refugees. Are those figures correct?
My understanding that those figures are correct, yes.
Thank you. So by my calculation then, that would be roughly about $773 million from last year. So the $27 million would be roughly a 4% increase in additional funding for settlement. Would that be correct?
Yeah, I believe that would be
Sure.
correct, but I turn that over to Katrina Taplin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If I can, 2016-17 is a pretty special year for us in terms of settlement funding, and so maybe I can explain it in terms of 3 components. We have a base amount for settlement funding of about $588 million, and this is the money we spend on settlement funding outside of the province of Quebec. For 16-17, we have 2 top-ups, if you like, to that money. One is $38.6 million in supplementary funding that has been provided for Syria that is being distributed as well. And on top of that are the funds from the federal budget, the $54.3 million over 5 years. So for 2016-17, that's roughly about $19.3 million. And then also, if I may, Mr. Chair, what you see in the supplementary estimates is a possible additional amount of $9.3 million, which is some unused contingency funding for settlement. And
in total, the additional amounts for settlement this year would be roughly about $90 to $100 million then, if I'm just doing the math in my head correctly?
in terms of what's available outside the province of Quebec,
It's, I would say, roughly about $640 million, but that includes funds we also spend on pre-arrival services overseas.
Sure. So by my math then, and what we just talked about, that would be about a 16% increase for funding for settlement services, yet the immigration levels report says that, well, and the minister's notes here say that you're looking at a 400% increase in bringing refugees to Canada. Do you think that the funding that's been budgeted here is going to be adequate to, given that there's a 400% increase in refugees coming in and we're seeing a 16% increase in funding for refugee services, do you feel that that's perhaps a bit off?
Mr. Chair, maybe I can just add to my colleague's comments. In terms of the member's question, it's a very welcome point that settlement and integration is frankly the most difficult aspect of this national project, and the needs of this group, in particular the government-assisted refugees, it does have a certain socio-demographic profile that is of higher needs. In terms of the injection of funds, to speak to the member's questions, there has been a significant injection of funds in terms of recent budgets associated with this 25,000 Welcome Refugee Initiative. So of the $678 million for the 25,000, there will be $150 million over 3 years to increase settlement.
Thank you. Just because you didn't answer my question and I'm running out of time. The minister introduced the issue in his speaking points of military housing and the fact that there had been cost savings realized due to the fact that these facilities weren't used. Because the minister introduced that, could you please provide the committee with the total amount spent across government departments on retrofitting or improving military housing that weren't used as part of the Syrian Refugee Initiative?
I have the amount that was saved in relation, so I have to do some math to figure out what the amount spent was. I believe through a parliamentary question, the Department of National Defence answered this question and talked about money spent for retrofitting the military bases that was already in their planned spending. They were already going to do that retrofitting anyways, and so that amount of money was already set aside for them to do that. And in that parliamentary question, they answered that the extra amount of money they put forward was $2.35 million, if memory serves.
So was there any extra funds above and beyond that were used to retrofit military houses specifically for this? And that, I guess, if that funding was allocated, it would have come out of the Department of Defense budget. And so that $2.5 million was essentially wasted because the housing wasn't used, correct?
So it was $2.35 million, and those retrofits still are in place and will be to the benefit of the people who are residing in that housing.
So who would be residing in that housing right now if it was retrofitted for refugees? And are there plans to use that housing for refugees in the future?
There's no plan to use that housing for refugees in the future. It was housing that was already on the bases, and then we set it up in terms of being welcoming for the refugee population as our backup plan in case we needed it.
Somebody is likely to live in those houses and will derive some benefit from the retrofits, but the main point is that we saved a lot of money because we did not have to use the military bases for refugees.
Perhaps one of the officials can provide information on this question. The committee is, many members of the government have raised the issue of waiving the immigration loan program for all refugees in Canada. Could you provide the committee with a cost estimate that should that proceed, what the total cost to waiving the immigration loans program for all refugees would be?
Yes, we could provide the committee with that information.
What is it?
I don't have that figure in front of me right now. It's several tens of millions of dollars, but we would want to provide the exact number.
Thank you. Given the last time the officials were in front of committee, there wasn't a system in place on tracking employment rates of Syrian refugees. Has that been rectified? And if so, what are the cost estimates to the government in terms of Syrian refugees requiring social assistance due to lack of employment?
20 seconds, please.
So I don't have cost estimates in terms of Syrian refugees on social assistance. Income support is provided for government assistant refugees for the first 12 months, as you're aware. In terms of how we will track those moving to employment, we are standing up a component in something called our Immigration Contribution Agreement Reporting Environment, or ICARE, and that will be available later this year as a proxy. So this is where we work through service provider organizations.
Thank you, Ms. Tapley. Ms. Kwan, 7 minutes, please.
Thank you very much. On the funding for language training, there was some breakdown of British Columbia. I wonder whether or not I could get the detailed information then on the organizations and the communities that received the language training in British Columbia. Aside from British Columbia, from our committee's witnesses, we heard from folks from Ocasio, Ontario, people from Costi in Toronto, and also folks from the Catholic Cross Cultural Services, and Mosaic from BC, and the YMCA from Cambridge and Kitchener, who actually highlighted the fact that they also receive funding cuts as well. And that would be for their normal resettlement services, and then as well as even though in some cases, not all of them, in some cases, they may not have had a funding cut this year, but they also didn't get an increase in funding either. And when their workload has increased significantly, in the case of the Catholic Cross Cultural Services, they actually stated that 437 Syrian refugees have turned up at their doors, and their funding did not go up, and they have had a funding cut, as an example. So I know that we won't be able to get into all the detailed numbers, but I wonder if the minister can provide the committee then on a detailed breakdown from community to community what that funding stream is for regular resettlement services, what the new injection of the money is for the Syrian initiative, and what they were targeted for and what organizations received that funding, so that we can have a clear understanding on what's going on. Because right now, what the minister is saying and what the officials has provided don't match with what the reality of what's going on in the community.
Well, I think we tried to be clear that in terms of the overall funding, some got cut, some got increases because of the changing distribution of immigrants over the previous 3 years. But on top of that, substantial additional funds were provided to accommodate the Syrian refugees, with the amounts depending on where the refugees were going to. But in terms of your detailed questions, perhaps one of the officials could say whether we can get that information that you want.
Mr. Chair, we'll be able to provide that information. And if I can, just for a couple of seconds, what I was trying to say earlier, we will provide that information to the clerk of the committee as appropriate, Mr. Chair. But of the $678 million, to the minister's point, there's been an injection of, or will be, $150 million over 3 years. But through these supplementary estimates A, which is what we're here today to talk about in part, we're seeking an additional $9.3 million that will help directly these service organizations to get to the very issues that the member is properly raising.
Thank you, Mr. Wex. I've actually stopped the clock so that response doesn't come out of your time.
Thank you very much.
Let's proceed.
Thank you. I don't mean to be rude. It's just that I only got 7 minutes. So with that, Mr. Chair, and to the minister and his staff, if we could actually get the detailed breakdown then for both the regular budget and as well as from the supplemental estimates, and so the increased dollars as well that's being asked for today, for a clear breakdown that will assist us a lot. On the question around cessation, actually, I just want to touch on this for a minute. This is a different realm, and I wonder whether or not the minister can provide us with this information. How many individuals has IRCC set a quota on bringing cessation against for the 2016-17 fiscal year? How many staff members are involved on the cessation files? And since the passing of Bill C-31, how many individuals have the cessation process been brought against them? And since the passing of Bill C-31, how many individuals have been deported? Of those deported, how many how many were deported on the basis that it is retroactive. That is, how many individuals have been deported for engaging in an act that have the cessation process brought against them before it was even brought in as legislation, and how many cessation cases are currently on hold, and how many cessation cases are currently before the courts, and in which provinces. And lastly, will there be further action that will be undertaken by the government to address this policy?
Okay, my strong impression is that all of those issues are CBSA issues.
With the exception that the targets actually come from the IRCC. CBSA carry out that work, but I believe that the information actually comes from IRCC.
Well, I will ask one of my officials to comment on that.
Perhaps I can suggest this while the staff are wondering about this. We can get the information back to us, to the committee, in written format, and I would welcome that as well, and for these questions to be answered. If the minister can commit to providing that, I would appreciate it, and I can move on to my next set of questions.
Well, we can provide information to the extent it's from my department. I'm not sure I'm entitled to commit to provide CBSA information, but to the extent it's from the Immigration Department, yes.
Okay. Thank you. I would appreciate that, and perhaps there might be some moments where the minister can work across ministry with CBSA to communicate with each other to endeavor to get the information that may or may not be able to take place, because I think governments often work in silos, but maybe we can break those silos down.
Actually, we work incredibly closely with the CBSA.
Fantastic. Then I would look forward to receiving all of that information across ministry from the minister then. On the issue around backlog, let me sort of get into this as well. According to the written response from the department dated March 10th, for Budget 2016, which proposes $25 million in the 2016-17 fiscal year to target specific applications for backlogs in Canada and overseas, and to reduce the processing time on sponsorships. So I wonder if the minister can provide us what are the specific backlogs that are being targeted, and how many applications have been and will be processed as a result of this increased funding, which sponsorship categories does each application belong to, and how old are the applications being targeted. And particularly with inland spousal sponsorships, there are issues that has been continuously being brought forward, and that is that, in fact, the backlog, the government is actually jumping the queue on different timelines of when they're processing the applications. So I wonder if the minister can provide answers to that. If not today, then in written form.
Well, certainly I don't have all those detailed numbers in my head, but I can tell you that the dollars from the budget are specifically directed to reducing those backlogs, and that's also reflected in the substantial increase in the level space for spouses. But I wonder if
I'm sorry, but the time is out, Minister. We're over time at this point. Perhaps in the next round of questioning.
And on the written response,
I believe we have a commitment. Minister, we do have a commitment from the department to provide the information that has been requested.
I don't know. You cut me off before I could answer.
We have the information now. If we can speak to it now, great. If not, we'll do it by
there will be another round that perhaps you may. Mr. Sarai, 7 minutes, please.
Good morning, Minister. I want to thank you again for being with us this morning. I want to ask you about one of the most popular questions that I get in my riding of Surrey Centre, and that is, how is our government going to address the processing times? I know that it's something that you are passionate about addressing. You've mentioned it each and every time you've come to this committee. But in fairness to the previous Conservative government, this is something that they pretended to champion, but in these estimated, it states that there's approximately 39 million will be going towards reducing application processing times. Can you tell us how you will achieve that goal of high admission, achieve that goal while having high admission levels for permanent residents? I'm wondering if you can tell the committee how your department will differ in addressing the problems of processing times from governments in the past.
Well, I'm not sure what the previous government said, but I know what they did. And what they did was that we saw processing times going through the roof over the last 10 years, particularly for family class. And so one of our central election platform commitments was to bring those down, which we are doing, and we are working every day to achieve that. But as I may have said before, one doesn't change a battleship on a dime. So whereas one can change provisions of the Citizenship Act through a simple act of Parliament, it takes time to hire the people to devise new methods to bring those waiting times down. And I can tell you that we have taken a number of concrete measures already, but there is a lot more still to be done. And in particular, for one of the more important things we've done is a 25% increase in the levels for spouses, partners, and children. In 2015, the level space was 48,000. In 2016, it was 60,000. So that means 25% more coming in this year than last year. And that is supplemented by the additional funding, which has been mentioned, which will allow us to hire more public servants, to do more processing. And finally, we are learning from the experience in Syria, where my department learned how to do things faster, and we are hoping, we are not just hoping, we are in the process of importing those speedier techniques that were learned for refugees into the family stream. So we've already acted on a higher number of levels, we've already acted on more money, and we are in the process of importing the quicker techniques which we applied for Syria into the family stream and other streams of immigrants.
Would you be able to elaborate on how many you're hiring to reduce wait times, processing times?
I don't have such a number. Perhaps my colleagues do.
Well, with respect to the family class, the spouses, partners, and children, moving from 48 to 60,000. I'll just check the numbers here, but I understand that there's 191 FTEs, additional FTEs for this fiscal year that will be retained to deal with the increasing levels, Mr. Chair, and at the same time attack the inventory. Those two things in combination will significantly have an impact on the overall processing times for that class.
Could you give an idea of compared to how many there are before?
Well, I believe there's an inventory right now, subject to being corrected by other officials, of about 80,000. And
how many FTEs?
Of FTEs?
This is 191 on a base of
450 FTEs at the moment, according to the 2016-17 report on plans and priorities that would be dedicated to this business line.
Okay.
Of horsepower for this fiscal year to deal with the very issue that the minister has commented on.
Thank you. Minister, can you tell us for language training, it's stated in the supplementary estimates, how will you increase, how will that be allotted going forward? I think you elaborated a little bit on the percentages. Will it be allotted based on a necessity, an area, and how do you figure out which areas have more refugees after the 13th month?
Okay. As my colleague Don Edlin explained, those additional fundings are allocated according to where the language training is needed most and where there have been waiting times to get in, but perhaps you can elaborate further.
So there's a couple of different ways. So there's the settlement pot of money itself that Ms. Tapley spoke to, and that's allotted based on that 3-year rolling average. And then language dollars spent on that, I believe in 2015 it was about 37% of the overall pot of money across Canada was spent on language training. Part of that is doing a needs assessment. What are the language training needs of this particular population in a particular location, and then matching the training to correspond with that. We're doing the same thing with the extra money on the Syrians, although we're moving it more to the communities where the Syrians are. What we're finding through the language assessments for the Syrians is either they have not much language skills in either English or French, and they're relatively low. So there's a special type of classes for people who are illiterate in their own language, called a literacy type of training. And then there's other levels of training corresponding to the Canadian language benchmarks, levels 1 through 4. And we're finding the majority of the Syrian populations correspond either to that illiteracy or to the language groups 1 through 4. And so then the training is devised around helping them at the level that they're at.
In addition, we heard a witness who had been here for over 13 months and had been waiting for 8 months prior to that, for 8 months prior to our government coming in, this new government coming in, and he had complained he still hasn't received ESL. Can you tell us, were these long wait lists for ESL or French language training inherited by this government from the previous government?
I don't know.
I'm not sure of the answer to that, although what we have been doing through the system that my colleague referred to, iCare, we've opened a module in that where we can actually start systematically tracking wait lists and how many people are on them, and we've set out guidelines so that people shouldn't be on more than 2 wait lists at a time. When we looked at the situation in British Columbia, there was just under 8,000 people purportedly on a wait list, but some of those people, their names were on that wait list since 2010. So 2010. And so are they still on a wait list? And there's been no checking back to make sure once they got into a class, they're taken off the wait list. And so we're hoping to get better information around the whole wait list situation for all our newcomers through this new module in iCare in the coming months.
Were wait lists prior to this government coming into place?
I'm sorry, the time is up. Perhaps in the next round we could follow up on that. Mr. Soroya, 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Minister, and the official coming up. My first question is to the officials. How much money was spent on the housing Syrian refugees at the hotel since November 4th, 2015?
I'll have to get back to you with a specific figure on how much was specifically spent on housing.
Minister announced another 10,000 guards coming soon. What is the total projected cost for the hotel rooms for these additional 10,000 refugees coming up? Any projected cost on it?
Yeah, I'll have to get back to you with that specific number.
You can't be kidding. Minister, it says here IRCC spent $188 million and saving of $110.7 million. How did this happen? It's almost 40% saving. Either that the budget was not done carefully, properly, or something was cut drastically to save 40% money from the budget.
The reason we spent dramatically less than we said we would is because we were dramatically efficient.
40%?
But the reasons I gave in my speech, then there were 3. Lower than anticipated costs for transportation and overseas processing. So the costs of the transport and processing were lower than had been projected. There were some contingency funds that were unused. Contingency funds are put in there just in case things go wrong, but they didn't, and so we didn't have to spend them. And the decision, which has been discussed earlier, not to use the interim refugee lodging sites. So those were 3 reasons why the costs came in significantly lower than had been projected.
I understand, but 40% is hard to believe it, especially when they come to the government funding. Anyway, my next question is, another 10,000 guards, refugees coming up. We are saying we need $39.4 million under the operating expenditures for these another 10,000 refugees. Is there any other cost we expect? Any hidden thing, any hidden cost should be added to this thing, which is not included in $39.4 million?
Well, look, first of all, you're saying how surprising it is we save so much money, but I think you should
it's hard to believe 40%.
Well, I think you should be happy.
I am happy, but
conservatives usually like to save money, and we save a lot. Okay, in terms of your question on the $39.4 million, there's 2 parts of the money for the 10,000 additional government-assisted refugees. The part you identified is $39.4 million to identify and process them, but then there's a larger component, almost $100 million, $99.6 million, which is to provide income support and other supports for once they get here. So the total cost, if you add up the two parts, is $139 million. That's correct. And my colleague has something to add.
And if I may add, in that $99.6 million, there's $31.6 million tagged for reception hotels to provide initial accommodations for Syrian refugees, to come back to a question that was just asked.
And Mr. Chair, if I can just add, with respect to the $110 million that was not spent, 40% of that was the contingency. The minister mentioned contingency, but 40% of the money that wasn't spent was associated with that.
Okay. Is that $199.6 million, is that good enough, realistic budget to meet the 10,000 people? We don't want to go through what we heard in the previous witnesses, people waiting for 13 months or 15 months.
Well, maybe if we're as efficient as we have been, which you found hard to believe, we might end up spending not all of that money. But that is the amount we think it will be required to support the new government-assisted refugees.
Minister, with due all respect, I'd rather spend the $99.6 million and people don't have to wait 13 months wait time for the ESL classes. As you know, the no ESL classes, there's no jobs.
Mr. Surya, unfortunately, your time is up.
I agree with you. That's why we put additional money in for the ESL.
Mr. Tabara, 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Minister and the staff, for being here today. I want to talk about the generosity of the Canadian government and the Canadian people of just bringing in so many Syrian refugees in a short amount of time. It really brings true to Canada's return to its humanitarian traditions, as shown not only by the unprecedented resettlement of thousands of some of the most vulnerable members of our global community in a very short period of time, but also by the reinstatement of various programs previously cancelled by the previous government. The interim health program has been fully restored on April 1st, 2016, after it was cut in 2012, leaving already vulnerable newcomers, particularly women and children, without access to basic medical care. Can you elaborate on the various significant changes programs aimed for refugees have been in the last few months?
Well, thank you for that very good question. You're right. We have changed things in a significant way since coming to power. Perhaps the single statistic which tells the story is if you look at resettled refugees, the levels for 2015, it was 13,800 was the target, and for 2016 it's 44,800. So that's more than triple the number of refugees that we're admitting this year compared with the last year of the previous government. So that's a big change. And you mentioned the refugee health care. I think that is also important. Those of us who were in Parliament in the old days will remember when that decision came through that a judge declared that this policy of denying basic health care to refugees was cruel and unusual and therefore unconstitutional. So, and yet the previous government continued to delay in implementing the orders of the court. So in some sense we had no choice because the court had ordered it, but it was something we had committed to do anyway. We think it is a decent thing to do to provide basic health care, and we weren't the only ones who said that. The court agreed too. And you ask what we've done. Well, another thing we've done, and that'll be the end of my list, I think 3 is enough, in the Citizenship Act, which is now going through Parliament. I think it will be through the House quite soon, and then on to the Senate. There we have made a basic change in terms of saying the government will no longer be able to revoke people's citizenship for certain criminal acts because we believe all Canadians are equal and there is only one class of citizen. So those are some of the things we have done since November.
Thank you for that. I know in my region, the medical community has been applauding that change, and I thank you for that, Minister. My second question is the previous government budget bill restricted refugee access to social assistance. How will in 2016-2017 supplementary estimates affect the ease of integration of Syrian refugees, including language training, housing, physical, mental health, and other fundamental important factors required for their integration in Canadian society?
Yeah, I'm not aware that the previous government restricted access to social assistance. Perhaps no. But certainly the additional funding that we are providing will help to resettle the refugees, teach them languages, help them get jobs, and hopefully minimize the need for people to go on social assistance. But, you know, anyone who is a Canadian permanent resident does have the right to go on social assistance, and that happens both to refugees and to others. But through our settlement funding, we are hoping to equip the refugees so that they will find jobs and not need to do that.
How much time do I have left?
30 seconds.
30 seconds. I guess that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tabara. Mr. Shipley, and I understand that you'll be splitting your time with Ms. Rempel, so 2.5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Good to see you back. And to the Minister, thank you for coming. I'm not on this committee, but I am quite astounded at some of the things that I'm hearing. Minister, all these announcements that come out, it would appear in terms of what I've been able to understand in the last 3/4 of an hour or half an hour, is that there's been absolutely no idea in terms of the costing, no analysis in terms of outcome. What I've seen is that we've been able to build in, you've been able to build in through your government, as was in the budget, some exorbitant contingency funds so that when things don't work out, I either got it there, or if not, it makes it look like you have saved successful amounts of dollars. When asked about the waiving the immigration loan program, these are all significant issues. Not able to give an answer. The military bases that were converted out of somebody's budget, it would appear now D&D likely. The people that are going there are not going there. I don't know if those buildings are sitting empty now waiting in case there is a change in the immigration. But again, we have no costs that we're giving today about it. The cost to renovate the hotels, which there was great announcements about in terms of the renovation, there's no guidelines in terms of where we are in terms of those costs. What is the cost of the new additional social assistance that is now being allocated for the refugee program, sir?
Well, you say you're not on the committee, but some of your questions don't seem to hit the mark, because I don't know what you mean.
In fact, they're all very relevant, Mr. Minister,
well, look,
because they're all related to immigration.
I don't think specific money has been allocated for social assistance. That social assistance is provincial, and if people need to go on social assistance, the province will pay. But I guess a general response to your point, and perhaps my colleague Richard Wex can deal with more specific, it's kind of hard for Liberals to win the way Conservatives pose their questions, because usually you say we're big spenders and we spend too much. And now we come in substantially under budget, and you complain about that too. So I'm not quite sure what we're supposed to do on spending to get your approval. Either we're spending too much, or we spend less, and you criticize us for spending too little. So perhaps we can't win, although in the last election, most Canadians seem to think we were okay.
Over to my colleague.
Well, we just want you to have a plan, Minister, with respect. I'm going to jump in here and look at,
But what
again,
about
the 400,
Richard
well, I'll take the time now. There's a 400% increase in refugees year over year, and I'm wondering, with regard to the immigration levels report, if the cost impact on municipal and provincial governments, given this 400% increase, was calculated, and if there was any consultations with provincial and municipal governments on providing social services to refugees related to a 400% increase in refugee amounts. This would be, and I'm directing it to the officials, This would be for school boards dealing with refugees, mental health services, etc.
I'll start off and turn it over to my colleagues. To the question of whether there was consultations with the provinces in the development of the levels plan, there was consultation both at the officials level as well as the minister with various face-to-face meetings and phone calls, and the officials, of course, through their regular channels. Obviously, there are downstream effects. It's a very fair point that the member is asking in terms of real downstream effects in terms of settlement and integration of this population. It's a national project. This government has put in $678 million over 6 years for the 25,000 initiative. We're reporting on that. We're trying to report on the expenditures and the plans over the six years, which we're happy to do if we could come back to that. But as I said, significant funds have been put in place, including with respect to settlement. And of course, given that this is a national project, we're all in this together, and we continue to consult with other stakeholders and other levels of government.
So you said there was a real downstream impact on provincial and municipal government. Has the department conducted a cost estimate on refugee settlement services of the downstream interest or impact?
Well, certainly, including the supplementary estimates today, where we're seeking another $18.3 million, is all part of the increase that we're seeking to deal with the very real issues of settlement and integration.
So the department then is saying that the downstream impact is $18 million?
I did not say that, no.
We'll come back.
Thank you. Mr. Chen, and I understand you'll be splitting your time with Mr. Tabar?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Actually, Mr. Tabar will have this time.
Okay.
Didn't have other questions prepared, but I wanted to go back to what we talked about, the $39 million that was extra funding for reducing the processing times. I wanted, Mr. Minister, if you can elaborate more on going forward in the next years to come too. How will this funding help for, in our four-year term? How will it help reduce processing times in the long run?
Okay, there's basically two ways to reduce processing times. One is to hire more people to do the processing, and the second way is to do the processing more efficiently, so you need fewer people to do a given amount of processing. And we're working on both fronts. We achieved this budget increase, which is now reflected in the estimates, which will allow us to hire more officials, which will allow them to interview more people and deal with more cases. And that is one of the ways in which we will reduce the processing times and reduce the backlogs. And the second way we will do that is that we will learn how to do things more efficiently. And that's what we did during the Syrian crisis, Syrian refugee experience, where officials learned to do things a whole lot faster than had previously been the case. And we're hoping to import the lessons learned from the refugee experience over to make it quicker to bring in families, to bring in economic immigrants, and so on. So it's a combination of more employees through receiving more money, as you see in front of you, and more efficiency so that a given number of employees can get more processing done.
And this is just not with refugees, this is all aspects of immigration, correct?
Yes, well, what I'm saying is that when we did the refugees, that was sort of a case study, if you like, or a pilot project for learning to be more efficient. So if the people who work in my department have learned how to be more efficient in processing refugees, then they can take the lessons learned from over there and apply those same principles to processing other groups of people, both family members, economic immigrants, and any kind of immigrant. So the plan is to draw on the lessons learned, and they're working actively on this. They have what they call tiger teams set up, groups of active public servants coming together to talk about, well, what did we learn from the Syrian experience? How can we apply those lessons learned over there to family class, to economic immigrants, to whatever? So people within the department are actively discussing that and putting into place what they have learned. So yeah, we will learn from the achievements that we had with the refugees and use that new knowledge to improve performance elsewhere.
I'll be splitting my time with Mr. Sarai if he has time.
Thank you. Perhaps, Minister, since we have a little bit of time and in the spirit of greater transparency, your immigration levels plan that you've provided numbers by categories. Would it be possible to receive an approximate regional and or country-by-country breakdown for each category from the department?
I know we publish information on immigration by country of origin. I'm not quite sure about region, but I will ask one of the officials to deal with that.
We can provide historical information both on which provinces immigrants arrive in and which country they came from. Our levels plan is not based on nationality, so we don't know how many people from which country will arrive in the levels plan this year, but that information can be provided retroactively. Canada's immigration programs are all nationality blind. They do not plan to get a certain number of people from a certain country.
So what you're saying, for instance, in the family class, there is no forethought put towards, okay, historically, this is a country from which we've received a very large contingent, and we are blind in terms of our planning process as to whether or not we'll be receiving large numbers from that country as opposed to other countries?
We're certainly not blind from our planning and operational process point of view. We know historical trends, and we use those trends to provide staffing and resources. But in our processing, we process cases in the order in which they are received.
Ms. Kwan, 5 minutes, please. Sorry, 3 minutes, please.
Thank you very much. I have a number of different questions. First off, how many GLBTQ GARs have been identified, processed, and are here in Canada? And while we're thinking about getting that answer, let me ask this question. Tracking of wait lists. The minister's official mentioned the iCare program, and I wonder, once that report is available, when can we expect that to be made available, and will it be made public? And can a copy of that report be submitted to this committee so that we can review that? In terms of breaking down of funding, I just want to be clear about the breakdown of the funding with resettlement. So what I'm looking for is which agencies have received additional funding above and beyond the normal resettlement funding for Syrian refugee and for the Syrian refugee initiatives, and how much has each organization received? How long is the additional funding to last? So that is to say, is it a long-term funding stream, or is it a short-term funding or a one-time cash injection? And what is the funding identified for? And when were the additional fundings released to the organizations?
Well, it seems that's almost the full 3 minutes just to ask the questions. So we might have to get back to you. But if any of the officials can answer part of it now, I turn it over to them.
Katrina and Andrea.
Okay, so Mr. Sheriff, I'll come back to the question on wait lists for language classes and tracking this now through the system we call iCare. So we've identified particular areas, northern and southern Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and the British Columbia one. I think both Ms. Edlin and I would say those figures are just a little off at this point as we continue to work through a better way to plan on that. So what we're reporting from, I can tell you what we're reporting from as of April 30th in our system, and so these numbers will have improved since then, but what I have is April 30th. In terms of numbers of Syrian refugees who've received language assessment, and then the numbers of Syrian refugees actually enrolled in IRCC-funded language training. We have an adult population who's here now of about 10,000 people. So of that, about 8,000 have received language assessments, and we have over 4,000, just slightly over 4,000, who are enrolled in language training now, and that's as of April 30th. So we're ready now to pull the next batch of information out, and this is information that's provided into the system by service provider organizations, and I have every confidence that those numbers will increase.
Ms. Kwan, the time is up. Ms. Zaid, 7 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Minister, for coming today. My questions would be in relation to the levels which have been announced for 2016. The government has been criticized for reducing the levels of the economic immigrants, possibly in favor of other categories such as family reunification. However, it should be noted that being separated from one's family and loved ones is a serious detriment and causes stress and a lack of support that can make it the life very difficult for the Canadians to integrate into Canadian society and to be contributing member of the Canadian economy. So therefore, I ask you, if would it therefore not hold that family reunification actually provides a net positive economic benefit for Canada and should be encouraged?
Absolutely. But we also want to encourage economic immigrants. We want to encourage refugees. And so the issue that you're raising is that the pie is only so big. So you have more of one, you have to have less of something else. And so the target we have for 2016 is 300,000. And I am told that that is absolutely the maximum capacity of the department. There's no way we can bring in more than 300,000. So because we had made this large commitment to refugees, the number of refugees is almost quadruple, 3 to 4 times higher than in 2015. The number of spouses is 25% higher, I think from 12,000 to 16,000 over that period. So that demonstrates a commitment to family unification. But we're also committed to strong economic immigrants because we need to grow the economy. But for that 1 year only, because the total capacity was limited and we had pressures on the other areas, we did have a small reduction for 1 year only of economic immigrants. And so that's how it played out. But I think certainly our actions indicate that, as you suggest, family unification is very important, and the numbers speak for themselves on that.
Thank you. During our study on Syrian refugees resettlement, this committee has heard from some witnesses, especially the sponsorship agreement holders, regarding quotas and caps for sponsoring Syrian refugees. Some sponsorship agreement holders said that they have adequate funds and other resources to sponsor even more refugees, but they are being held back due to the quotas and the caps for this year. So it is quite a great testament to the extreme generosity of the Canadians, the way they are welcoming all the Syrian refugees. However, given the resources the government has available and the levels available for Syrian refugees, could you please discuss the impact that admitting more private sponsor refugees from Syria over and above the stated numbers would have on other refugee admission streams with regards to numbers as well as the processing times and in all the other areas?
Yeah, well, that's a good question, and it is certainly the case that if we admit more of one, we have to admit less of another, because I just said 300,000 is our absolute maximum. So we do have this issue that Canadians have been overwhelmingly generous, and that's a good thing in their response to Syrian refugees, so much so that we have trouble keeping up with the demand. And so we have made some adjustments to allow more Syrian refugees to come into Canada by saying that all those who applied before March 31st would be accepted by the end of this year or early next year. But that won't meet the full demand. I'm aware of that. Not everybody who wants to sponsor a Syrian refugee, or indeed another refugee from another country, will be able to do that as quickly as they would like to. And that's because we have this constraint on our total levels. And so much as I would like to have more refugees faster for the Syrian refugee sponsors. I don't feel I am able to because of the negative impact that would be on other categories of immigrants who are also deserving.
I see in the levels indicator target of 20,000 to 22,000 caregivers for 2016. The low is 20 and the higher is 22. We all know the important role that the caregivers play for many Canadian families. And about the backlog that has grown in this program in recent years. In my riding of Scarborough Centre, we have many caregivers who, through this program, have become contributing members of our Canadian society, playing a very important and integral role. I know that the department has undertaken a number of changes to this specific program to protect the rights and meet the needs of both the caregivers as well as the employers. Could you discuss these reforms and how they will enable the target for admission to be met?
Okay, on caregivers, I make 2 points. One, because of the pattern of inventories in recent years and the levels of admission, those processing times are going to come down in the next 2 or 3 years. They'll come down by approximately 10 months per year, I believe. So we have good news on the horizon for caregivers that those processing times are going to be coming down. We also made a commitment in the election, which we are going to do and which I think would help caregivers, and that is to set up a system of regulated companies whose job it would be to hire the caregivers on behalf of families. That would help the families. It would make it easier for them to hire caregivers, and it would help the caregivers because if there's a bad situation with a family, the company can find the caregiver a different family. Now that I believe is not under me, it's under ESTC, but it is something that is being worked on now. And I think Richard Weck said something.
I'll just add very quickly to the Minister's point. This business line is increasingly under control, Mr. Chair. There's been a decrease in the inventory to the tune of about 34%. From 58,000 to 38,000 over the past year. And as the Minister said, as a result of that, although wait times in the past were high, in the order of 48 months, within the next year or so, that will be coming down to 12 months, I guess within the next 2 years.
Thank you, Mr. Wex. Ms. Rimpel, 7 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd just like to pick up a question that my colleague Ms. Kwan asked. How many LGBTQ have been admitted as refugees since November 4th, 2016?
My understanding is we don't record that, but I'll turn it to David.
Yes, we have certain standard statistical data fields in our systems. We record people's nationality, age, gender, and so forth. We do not count people's sexual orientation, so we do not have statistics on that. We would have to ask it of every individual to have reliable statistics on that.
Thank you. In developing the immigration levels report, were any school boards consulted on the budgetary impact of providing services to a 400% year-over-year increase in refugee arrivals?
Mr. Chair, we have a robust consultation process with the provinces, and in the case of 2016, we also consulted heavily with certain municipalities, but we didn't consult specifically with school boards. We used intergovernmental consultations between provinces and municipalities in terms of building our levels plan.
Are there any plans to provide funding to local school boards who are struggling to provide services to Syrian refugees?
So, Mr. Chair, we have a program we call Settlement Workers in Schools. This is a program that rolls out nationally outside of Quebec, and where we target settlement workers in the school system to help bridge that gap between immigrant parents and their children and what's expected of their children in terms of homework, extracurricular activities, and helping to address some of those issues.
So there's no plans for direct funding to school boards outside of that program, given the 400% increase year over year in refugee arrivals?
No, we have no plans to fund individual school boards to deliver K-12 education.
Thank you. What was the total expenditure across government departments, including transportation, lighting, photography services, etc., for the photo opportunity held at Pearson Airport in late 2015 when the first Syrian refugee arrived?
available here, and be happy to identify the costs associated with that event and report it to the clerk.
So that information will be provided to the chair of this committee?
Can you, Mr. Chair, can you just repeat the question that's
sure. It was what was the total expenditure across departments, including transportation, lighting, photography services, any other potential costs related to the photo opportunity held at Pearson Airport in late 2015?
What?
We'll undertake to get the information that we have available to the committee, have it available.
Thank you. Given that the Three Amigos conference will be coming up, and certainly the immigration levels would have an impact on this, I'm just wondering if the officials can update the committee on the status of a formal review for the Mexican visa requirement being lifted.
The government in its platform committed to lifting the Mexican visa, and there's not yet been an announcement made on that. And the review is ongoing.
So would I be correct in saying that the formal review is not complete as of today?
That's correct.
Thank you. The Liberal government committed to increasing a number of applications that it will accept every year under the parents and grandparents class, but it's also said that it will keep the number of landings in this category constant. So what I don't understand is if you're increasing the numbers of applications that you're going to take, but keeping the landing constant, would I be correct in assuming that this would create a significant backlog?
I can take it, Ms. No, the number of landings this year will require the processing of more applications than will be received even under the increased cap. So the inventory will decrease. It won't decrease as much as it would have.
So would this policy change that the Liberals made then cause processing times under the PGP category to increase?
No.
Okay, thank you. With regard to going back to the downstream impact of providing or increasing refugees by 400% year over year, has there been any specific consultations with health boards or ministers of health specifically on providing the cost impact of providing mental health services to Syrian refugees?
I certainly have had multiple consultations with my provincial counterparts, ministers of immigration. I think they may have spoken to their health counterparts. I have not myself spoken to provincial health ministers.
So would I be correct in characterizing that there hasn't been specific consultations with regard to the increase in or any particular estimates of the increase in costs or service provision levels related to health care for a 400% increase in refugees year over year?
Well, it's not a 400% increase. It's less than that. But I just gave my answer. Others may have spoken to health ministers. I have not.
So in your notes that you provided to committee, you say that it's quadruple the range for 2015. So is it a 400% increase or not?
Quadrupled the range. I'm looking at these numbers, 13,800 and 44,800. It's over 3 times. It's not quite 4.
Well, I would ask for specificity then in your notes, Minister, going forward. Going back to the cost of the immigration loan program, since an hour has passed, I'm wondering if the department officials have been able to provide any more information or pull any more information on the projected cost of waiving the immigration loan programs for all refugees.
Mr. Chair, the only thing I would add, we have not identified any additional costs during the course of the hour because we've been answering questions. But the only thing I would say is that there's no decision on this issue at this moment. So many issues are being considered and discussed internally, and advice is being given to the minister and to the government.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Kwan, 7 minutes, please.
Well, thank you very much. I have a question to follow up on from the last round back in May 5th, 2016, and this is related to the additional employees that are being sent back to the Middle East to process privately sponsored applications. At that time, I requested information about the details of the operation, how many staff is being sent back, how much is being allocated, and so on. And at that time, there was no information available. I wonder whether or not that information is now available.
So in terms of processing refugee resettlement files across the entire network, in the period of January to June, which is all we know about so far in terms of temporary duty, we have 412 weeks of temporary duty, and I hesitate to use that in the number of people, because some people go on temporary duty, they're there for 2 weeks, and some people go for 6 weeks. So it's kind of a better measure to call it by 412 weeks of temporary duty. And that's 288 weeks of temporary duty over that 6-month period to the Middle East, and 124 weeks of temporary duty elsewhere. And this is additional to the staff that are already in place in places like Cairo, Nairobi.
And what's the cost? What's the cost for these 412 weeks and 288 weeks, respectively?
I don't have that cost breakdown with me. We'd have to provide that.
And could we also have the cost as well on sending the staff back and the transportation cost related to that as well? In my March 10th questions to the minister or to the staff, questions were asked about the breakdown of the funding allocated to the organizations. I keep coming back to the same questions because that set of answers that came back did not provide for the actual funding allocation for those organizations. And I wonder whether or not that allocation has now been made for those organizations, and can I receive that information?
We can certainly provide the information that's being requested in terms of funding allocations to the organizations. I don't know if Ms. Tapley has any additional information she'd like to add.
So if I could, I know it's a long list of organizations, so then if I could get that list, I have the list already, but I have no dollar amount attached to it. And so what is the dollar amount that has been allocated for those organizations? And I have a broad statement in each of the answers about what that organization generally does. But I don't know within that organization, is there different programming? And I would appreciate the detailed breakdown of the programming of the cost as well, for us to fully understand what is going on the ground with the funding allocation and how refugees and Syrian refugees are actually being supported. On the living care program, I'm interested in this. With the 2016 target levels, what, with the admissions of around 16,500 living caregivers in 2016, how many of the cases or persons does the minister anticipate will be left in the backlog of living care giver applications? And were the 2,750 applications received for each new stream in 2015? And in terms of the healthcare cost, what is the minister's view on the caring for the children class and caring for the people with high medical needs class in the future? What is the breakdown of that, in other words, out of that global number?
I can't give you those precise numbers.
I'll start off by saying, and turn it to Mr. Manicom, that if the question is what is the inventory at the end of 2015 and 2016 for caregivers, it was 38,000 and 26,000. Projected to be 26,000 respectively. I'll turn it over to Mr. Manicom to talk about with respect to the intake, which is expected to be considerably lower than the range level this year for caretakers.
Yeah. Yes, I would just clarify that the number of expected admissions in the caregiver program this year is 22,000 as regards to not 16,000. And therefore, we expect that at the end of the year, the inventory will be not much more than 1 year's worth of levels. With regard to the 2 new classes, there's a maximum space available in each class of 2,750 spaces, principal applicants. So far, the number of applications into those classes have been quite modest, several hundreds. We would be expecting 600, 700, 800 in each class this year, and we've had roughly similar proportions in each year. These numbers are generally small because the former living caregiver program is still open for permanent resident applications for caregivers who were admitted as temporary workers previously.
Does the ministry keep track of applications for for the living caregivers, applications for family reunification? And if so, what is the backlog there? And how long is the wait for these caregivers to be reunited with their families? How long is their wait?
Yeah. The inventory numbers we were talking about are the applications of the caregiver and their family members, so they're a combined application for permanent residence. In this program, about 50% of the applicants are caregivers and 50% are family members. Processing times right now are backward-looking, about 48 months, but we expect those to drop rapidly over the next year or two.
On the housing, just back to the housing issue with respect to the military bases, I actually asked that question some time ago and I got the answer at $2.3 million that was expended. So now we understand that that money actually came out of another ministry, so not from this ministry. So I also asked the question around temporary. Okay, so quick question then. Given that the housing is actually sitting empty at the moment and it's not being used, and there are still refugees, although a significant number have actually been into permanent housing, but many of them are actually in substandard housing, is there any thought from the government in utilizing this housing for Syrian refugees?
No, there's not.
Thank you. Mr. Asasi, 7 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Now, I was wondering if, Minister, thank you kindly for appearing before this committee again. I was wondering if my first question could be a follow-up to one of the issues that has been focused on by other members of this committee, namely, I suppose, your insistence on being at the airport when the first wave of Syrians arrived in Canada. I do seem to recall that it was a moment of great pride for many Canadians. They saw yourself, the Prime Minister, premiers in various provinces welcoming Syrians. Could you perhaps explain to us why you thought it was significant that you be at the airport? Was it more in recognition of the great generosity shown by Canadians, or was it to impress upon the Syrians that we were very grateful they were arriving?
Well, I thank you for that question. I think the second part of your suggestion is important, that we wanted to show to the Syrian refugees that Canada welcomed them. And not so much me, but when the Prime Minister went to the first plane and welcomed the refugees as new Canadians, welcome to your new home, that photograph went around the world. And people everywhere in the world saw it. I remember going to Jordan, and I met a group of refugee children at a UNICEF place in Jordan, and those refugees knew nothing about Canada. Their families had not applied to come here, but they came up to me and they said, "Oh, I see your Prime Minister welcomed us Syrians at the airport." So I think one of the things we as a country have done is, where in other countries are closing their doors or making it tougher, we are welcoming people. And I think that photograph sent that message around, that the Prime Minister of our country has himself gone to the airport to welcome refugees, and that sent a message. And for me, it was something I wanted to do because it was something we'd all been working on very hard, so we were also starting to see the fruits of our own labor when the first group of refugees arrived, the first time in Toronto and then later in Montreal. And I also spoke to quite a number of refugees in Amman at the airport there, that when they were leaving to come here.
Thank you. Now, my second question relates to your testimony when you first arrived today. I noted here that as a result of efficient planning and your insistence and your department's insistence on cost saving, that there is $110 million that was saved. Now, in your presentation, you did say that the cost saving that did occur would probably be earmarked towards a number of different things, one of which is to manage settlement programs. Could you be a bit more specific as to how you will be steering the money that has been saved in a prudent fashion, where you think that money may be used?
Thank you. Perhaps I'll turn that question as to where specifically that money will go over to Don Edlund here.
So my understanding is the money that was saved in relation to this initiative for IRCC, that was over $110 million, that's actually gone back into the fiscal framework for use of the Government of Canada. It's not been repurposed within IRCC. And so what we are doing then is having other sources of fund identified for continuing to deal with the Syrian refugee resettlement and the increase in the levels plan.
Thank you for that.
Consequence of that saving, the overall deficit of the government is smaller.
Absolutely. Another question perhaps we could focus on is, in your opening remarks, you did talk about your interest in making sure that you were on track to meet new targets that were provided in your ministerial mandate letter. Could you possibly elaborate on that, how that is
to meet
new targets, to make the department more efficient in terms of processing various types of immigrants to this country? You did state that you think that you are on track to meet those targets that were in your mandate letter.
Yes, I do believe we're on track for the 300,000 level plan. If that is your question, but I also talked about the greater efficiency that we learned from the refugee experience that can be imported into the overall program, and that will help us to achieve greater levels in the future. But in terms of the current year, we are on track.
And this is for various categories of applicants?
Well, you never know the absolute number till the end of the year, but we anticipate that we will hit the 300,000 target, or at least within that range.
My next question is, we've heard from various witnesses that have taken the time to appear before this committee that there is perhaps better ways of making sure that we do take care of the healthcare needs of some of the families that are arriving from Syria. Would you be open to the possibility of focusing on that issue to make sure that we go about the provision of health services in the most efficient fashion?
Well, as our Prime Minister likes to say, there's always a better way. And so I have no doubt there's a better way, but you'd have to explain, what do they mean when they say a better way? A better way in what sense?
In terms of the doctors that we heard of, dentists
15
in
seconds.
particular, they were explaining to this committee perhaps ways that we could tweak the offering of basic dental services. So, yes, that's correct. Thank you, Minister.
Thank you, and the time is up for that round. Mr. Soroya, and I understand you'll be splitting your 5 minutes with, Ms. Rempel.
Great. With regard to the increase in refugees that's outlined in the Immigration Levels Report, are there any plans to the officials to target Yazidi girls or Yazidis through the Joint Partnership Program, or under any category in the Immigration Levels Report?
You said to the officials?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, I guess I'll open up and then turn it to Mr. Manicom. Just by way of context, of course, the government recently fulfilled its multi-year commitment for Iraqis in 2015 of over 23,000. We do continue to rely on the UNHCR with respect to referring cases to us. Persecution based on religion is considered by visa officers as we know, but we do not track cases based on race or religion. We are, anecdotally, we know we're dealing with some Yazidi cases at the moment, and I also believe that we may be planning a trip later this year to northern Iraq to look at various options. With that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Manicom to see if there's any additional comments.
Yes, and I'll in turn turn it over to Don Edlund operationally. I know we have a trip planned to Erbil in northern Iraq, and we continue to work with UNHCR to identify most vulnerable groups. Most of the Yazidi population has been very tragically persecuted, are in camps in northern Iraq, which are difficult to access, some in camps in Turkey. Some cases have been identified by private sponsorship groups, and we're endeavoring to get to them as quickly as possible. Perhaps Ms. Edlund has more details.
So my colleagues have referred to the fact that we're doing the planning now to do an area trip into northern Iraq to Erbil in the fall, and we're just evaluating whether we can do that and maintain the safety and security of our staff.
So do you anticipate that this trip would result in a specific program, say under the joint partnership program that would allow, sponsorship program that would allow Yazidis to come into, be identified and come into Canada, such as a proposal provided by One World International? Similar type of program.
So the cases that we're hoping to interview and process in northern Iraq in the fall are cases that we already have in hand. So for example, Syrian privately sponsored refugees in our office in Amman are found in northern Iraq, so we're going to go look at that.
Specifically Yazidi.
So the Yazidis who are in northern Iraq, it's not a refugee situation per se because people are internally displaced, and so we have to do some policy work around thinking through what the possible levers would be to work on that population.
Could you just perhaps provide the committee with a brief update around the status and current processing levels of resettlement of Iraqi refugees that have been impacted by the crisis in the Middle East? So you've now said that going to Erbil in the fall is a priority in terms of looking at Yazidis. That's what I'll take away from that conversation. My understanding is that resettlement of Iraqi refugees has dramatically slowed in the last few months. Would that characterization be correct?
Yes, the Government of Canada met its commitment to resettle over 22,000, I believe, Ms. Edlund, 23,000 Iraqi refugees. It was the largest resettlement program of any single nationality that Canada had done in a long time. We continue to process Iraqi refugees, but at smaller volumes.
Could you provide to the committee where your understanding is the majority of Yazidis are located? Would it be correct to characterize that would be in northern Iraq?
The Yazidi population is primarily in northern Iraq. Also, some are in parts of Syria along the no longer barely existing Iraq-Syria border. We understand there are some Yazidi refugees in camps in Turkey as well.
So then by this admission, would you say that by meeting the commitment on Iraqi refugees and not increasing that or focusing on that area, given that Yazidis are typically located in that area right now, that perhaps we're missing an opportunity to bring Yazidis to Canada?
No, I would not agree with that characterization. There are large numbers of extremely desperate populations all over the Middle East. At this time, we are processing some Yazidi cases. Most of the Yazidi population, tragically, are not accessible to our officials or officials of any resettlement country.
Unfortunately, the Conservative round is up, Mr. Saroya. Mr. Sarai, and I understand you'll be splitting your time with Mr. Chen?
Yes.
5 minutes, please.
We constantly hear, Minister, from provinces, cities, from the Maritimes to Saskatchewan to even Vancouver Island, from our economic forums, that we need new immigrants, we need more immigrants, and everyone is kind of hungry for them. Do you think the current numbers, even though they are the largest since World War I, these numbers, do you think they would be enough to satisfy the demand, or will we still be short of the need for more immigrants?
Well, that's a very good question, and it kind of summarizes a big part of my job for this summer, because we currently, as I said, are admitting 300,000 in 2016, and by November of this year, we have to announce a plan for levels in 2017, 2018, and 2019. So that will address precisely your question. So I don't want to prejudge what that number will be before I do the consultations, but I will personally, and Parliamentary Secretary as well, be going across the country and listening to various groups in every province and territory, I believe, and getting their input. I mean, I think in general, without getting into specific numbers, given our aging population, given our increasing dependence on immigrants, that we definitely need immigrants. Whether we need significantly more or not much more or a lot more, I think that'll be an outcome of these consultations that will soon take place.
On March 14th, federal, provincial, and territorial ministers of immigration, your counterparts, met in Ottawa to talk about the future of immigration in Canada. Can you share with us today what that meeting looked like and what their requests were?
Well, myself and my department in the province has certainly cooperated fantastically well on everything to do with the Syrian refugees. I do remember when I initially asked the provincial ministers how many they could each bring in. The total, if you added it up, came to more than 25,000, which was our target. So the provinces were really keen and positive in working with us on this refugee project, and so that's where we first met. So I think in general we have a very strong relationship. I am planning a trip to India later this year and have invited provincial counterparts to come. They all won't come, but some may, so I think we do work well together. Where we sometimes disagree is that they always want more provincial nominees, and I cannot always give them as many more as they want, so that is sometimes a bit of a bone of contention. But I would say overall the atmosphere is very good. And there's one other final point on that I'd mention, and this was a proposal from the Quebec minister to have a federal-provincial meeting on credentials issue and to learn from best practices on the credentials issue. Now, to me, that's a really important topic, but it's something that is about 90% in provincial jurisdiction and very little in federal. And so the fact that Quebec in particular, but all of the provinces were positive, wanted to meet with us and with each other to compare best practices was a very good idea, which we will definitely follow up on.
Mr. Chen, 1 minute, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to follow up on my colleague's questions earlier across the way around consultation with school boards. And I believe that it's always important to look at history and to learn from the mistakes of the past. I know in my former role at the school board that 5 or 6 years ago, we settled hundreds of Roma refugee children. We provided classrooms for them. We hired new teachers. The peers were taught about who refugees were. And then, under the previous government's so-called crackdown on bogus refugees, these children disappeared. And according to one peer-reviewed Osgood Hall Law Journal study, hundreds succeeded with their refugee claims, but most did not. Instead, they encountered racist rhetoric that drew on stereotypes about Roma being fraudsters, beggars, and criminals. And this impact the school board adversely. I know Ms. Tapley mentioned earlier about school boards not being consulted. Perhaps in the future this would be a consideration of the department.
Quick answer.
The minister has indicated we'll have a robust consultation schedule for 2017, and there will be an opportunity for all to submit submissions as part of that process.
Thank you.
Perhaps I could add one point on that. We are a government that tends to respect provincial jurisdictions, federal, municipal. There is nothing less federal, more provincial than schools, school boards. So we can certainly consider that idea, but Some might think that would be intruding into territory that is not ours if a federal government directly approached school boards, which is so clearly in the provincial domain.
That will conclude our rounds of questioning. And perhaps, Mr. Manicombe, perhaps the previous request that I had made, maybe I'll try to get at it in a slightly different way. Past governments have provided target levels by mission. Would it be possible for you to provide target levels by missions to the committee?
I'd defer to my operational colleagues, but generally speaking, we do processing more and more at different stages at different centralized offices around the world and in Canada, so that the mission by mission permanent resident targets are becoming somewhat less meaningful, but I guess we can examine what information we could make available.
I would just add, Mr. Chair, I think that's fair, but it is increasingly becoming very difficult given the integrated nature of our network electronically. So I think it would be very difficult to track, but we will undertake to do so.
Thank you for that undertaking. I will now suspend for... sorry, Ms. Kwan.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, before you suspend, I wonder if we can ask an overall question from you to the minister and to the officials, that the information that we've requested and the responses be provided back to us before the end of session. The reason why I ask this is this: there's been previous questions that's been asked, and I have to say the information in coming back from the ministry is very, very slow. Just as we were engaged in the discussion, my staff notified me to say we just got a response on a question that you asked some time ago, back in May 10th. And so I find that really challenging, and often the answers that we get back is deficient. It actually does not fully answer the questions that's been put to them, and so consequently today I had to ask for further information on questions that I've already asked. So I wonder whether or not, through you, Mr. Chair, if you could make that request to the minister and to the staff, that would be much appreciated.
So you heard the request. We will be doing an interim report, and timeliness of information from the department is critical for us to be able to properly prepare that report. We're not saying forthwith, but would it be possible to have the requested information before the end of the session?
Mr. Chair, the request is certainly noted, and as always, we will do the very best we can, and we'll go back to the office and assess what is outstanding. We will commit to do the very best we can, as we always do.
Thank you. That's highly appreciated. And on those items that you are not able to, if you could provide us with timelines when that information will arrive at the committee. I'd like to thank all of the minister for appearing. It's always a pleasure to have you before our committee, the staff from the department, and I'll suspend for 2 minutes to allow the minister and staff to leave, and we will return with our votes on the estimates.
Well, thank you. Thank you all. Thank you.
The meeting shall resume. Shall vote 1A under Citizenship and Immigration carry? Thank you. Carried. Shall vote 10A under Citizenship and Immigration carry? Thank you. And shall I report the votes on the supplementary estimates to the House? Carried. Thank you. Meeting is adjourned.